Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Cross. I'm the media director for ISSA, and today I'm pleased to welcome our guest, Alex Duta, the founder and CEO at Albiware. Alex, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Really appreciate being here.
It's a pleasure. Before we started recording, we talked about we might have met somewhere. We've been to a lot of trade shows, so I'm sure we have shook hands somewhere.
Absolutely. The industry is super small, and I'm positive I've seen your face and bumped into you at a show before.
Yeah,
So
and I look forward to maybe seeing you at one this year.
yeah, you going to the
But
experience in Vegas?
I'll be there. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Awesome. We'll see
coffee
you
or
there.
beer or whatever on me.
Awesome. Sounds
All
like a
right.
plan.
So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So I'm actually a first generation immigrant from Romania. Family fled communism from Romania to the States. Took my first steps on American soil. Grew up in the restoration industry. So my dad was a subcontractor for some of the larger fire chasing restoration companies within the Chicagoland market. Eventually, dad and I partnered together to start a restoration company instead of him subcontracting for others. Had an awesome ride with that company. It's still here in the Chicagoland market. Rome Xterra. We do eight figures of revenue, 90 or so employees running around the Chicagoland area, helping homeowners in times of need. And during the time of building Rome Xterra, the restoration company, we had seen that there was a lack of technology that was focused on solving restorers' biggest challenges. So Albiware basically started with a what if. What if we could solve some of our challenges at our restoration company by applying technology? And we basically built this all-in-one workflow management tool for the damage restoration space.
So thank you for what you're doing for the industry, but there's something else you're going to do, and that's help entrepreneurs. That's what we're going to talk about
Absolutely,
today. And
100%.
and the topic is hustlers fail at scale. I was just thinking, if you don't hustle, you're not going to succeed, but you have a different thought on it because it seems a successful entrepreneur is automatically a hustler and that they'll win. But talk about that. How do you identify a hustler, or when does one realize they are one?
Yeah. Yeah. So that those words came out when I was writing the book Restoration Millionaire, which was basically a business self-help book for the industry. And when those came out, I don't know, it just felt like I had hit something. And I went and I bought the domain hustlersfailatscale.com and a few other things. And I think my future book will be all about that. But I think as entrepreneurs, especially small business entrepreneurs, like in the restoration space, we start with a truck and a credit card, and then we go suck out sewer water and eventually grow this business. We get so heavily rewarded in the early days by the hustle. And that's like what it's all about, right? At the beginning, you don't have millions of dollars to go hire and float a large staff. So you end up being the person who does the, removal of the carpets and sucks out the water and writes the estimate and deals with the adjuster and collects the payment and such. The problem is, and if you'll talk to most restoration companies, they'll say, "Oh yeah, around 3 to 4 to $5 million, I felt like I hit a plateau." And there's all these different plateaus across the restoration growth journey, and that happens because the amount of reward we get on the hustle becomes diminishing. It starts going away. And what I mean by that is you can control everything as a hustler up to a certain volume. And then at that scale, right, when you can control 15 jobs, right, a month or 20 jobs a month, but when you get 40 to 50 jobs per month, you can no longer be in control of everything. And if your superpower is the hustle, right, it just goes away. It becomes diminishing, right? And you become scaling, or you fail at scale. So the whole premise of bringing that awareness to restoration is instead of focusing on the hustle, once we've broken through our first $1 to $2 million, we need to basically build out our teams and work through teams that can kind of be experts in small pieces of the puzzle and maybe not as hustling as we are. And we need to rely on systems that are repeatable and scalable to grow our organization to where it's got enterprise value, to where, it's making an impact within the market.
That's cool. I have to think that when you talk to people that are in this situation, they have pushback. They might think, "No, I got to work hard. I got to work harder." Do you ever hear that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you do?
Yeah.
How do you convince them? How
Well,
do you show them?
well, I don't tell anybody you have to stop working harder. Like
Okay.
you don't stop working. Like I still put in 12-hour days and such.
Absolutely.
But what I challenge people is, you know, to kind of take a look at, are you working hard to stay busy because of the dopamine rush of the hustle? Or are you truly working hard and making an impact and moving leverage? And what I mean by that is kind of do an audit of what you're doing throughout your day, right? And ask yourself, okay, are you quote unquote hustling because you're doing the mitigation work, let's say, right? You're back to back, you're doing all these jobs. Great. Well, how much do you think you're worth? Let's say you're worth $120,000 a year or $100,000 a year. I don't think that's a crazy number for a business owner, right? It's like, okay, well, is there somebody who can be doing that work for $40,000 a year? And the answer is probably yes. Okay. Well, you need to be replacing those tasks of sucking out the sewer water with people that can do it and maybe even do it better than you for $40,000 a year. Otherwise, you're costing yourself that delta. And then it starts clicking for people. They're like, oh, but the number one reason people don't want to level up and step up is because you kind of end up becoming in your comfort zone, right? You know how to suck out water. You know how to take care of all this. You don't know how to deal with employees. You don't know how to set vision. You don't know how to do the accounting. You don't know how to do the marketing, right? So you kind of stay within that comfort zone. It's very uncomfortable to get out of this. And plus, like, there is no dopamine rush to accounting. There is no dopamine rush to like dealing with people, right? So, yeah, I'm not saying don't work hard. You have to work hard. We're entrepreneurs. We're building legacy within our business. But what I'm saying is if you're going to use time and energy to pull on a lever, pull on the lever that's going to have the maximum output. Don't just pull on the lever that like the one that has the least resistance and is just bouncing up and down and then just be, super happy that it's moving so quickly and it's bouncing up and down, if that makes sense.
It does. So as you talk to your clients or others in the industry about this, and they see your point, and then a year later you check in and they're not doing anything, why not? What's the pushback? What are the skills that they're lacking that would help them get to that next level?
Yeah, that's a profound question. I see this oftentimes, and I think it's a couple of things. I think the common one, and I'll tell you a story about somebody who I did private coaching with and constantly ended up slipping back down, right? Slipping back into the hustle and away from, you know, um, the muscle, I call it, right? To make it rhyme. But it's like a lack of purpose and a lack of buy-in of something greater out there, right? So what I mean by that is, you know, you can make a decent living and a lot of money and you can be in this hustle, nonstop circuit. But if you're not aligned to what's something greater out there in the future and you don't know exactly how to get there and how to get it, that's what will make you kind of slip back into, okay, well, I just want to go back into what I'm good at and hit the dopamine rush of the hustle. So in this particular individual's example, he was making good money. There was nothing wrong with that. And he felt like he had a weakness of a leadership team, right? He felt like he couldn't lead people and he felt like that was his area of weakness. So he's like, okay, I'll just do it myself. So he was running this organization that was like $7 million a year with no leadership team whatsoever. It was literally him and the technicians, right? And he would try to build out this leadership team and then run into his lack of empathy, his lack of leadership, all these areas of weaknesses. And then he'd say, I'm just not cut for this. And then he would kind of, get rid of the leadership team and then go back, right? His ultimate goal, he didn't really know what he wanted to do with the company until he realized that like his ultimate goal was to support his family in a passive way, like his family needed him. And it wasn't until one of his children had some sort of episode, I don't know what it was, but terminally ill, that he realized, oh, family needs my time. And at that point, when he identified his greater purpose, like, hey, I need to be here for my kids and I also need the passive income, it wasn't until that clicked that he was able to build out his leadership team. It's not like he knew and he had the leadership skills to build out the team, but he was willing to go through it because he had hit rock bottom and it was like pure necessity. So most people don't have a higher purpose. They don't know, well, what's greater out there than the money, than the reviews, than the good looking organization. And they don't really need to step away from the hustle. They want the 10 to 15 to $20 million business, or the business that, cash flows without them being involved, or they want all these things, but they don't know why they want them and they don't know what their purpose is. So I think it's a matter of stepping back and understanding what's your purpose, what is your future vision, and being super clear and bought into that yourself, so that way you can step away from it.
Yeah, I like that. And I've considered kind of that thinking of your purpose. What's your true north? Where do you want
Yep,
to go? Where do you want to end up? So, so Alex, thinking about starting a new company, I've started one, you have. The big question we always get is if you could do it all over again, tell us about that.
absolutely. So I think if I were to do it all over again, I would probably start with overcoming my scarcity mindset. So what I mean by that is most restoration businesses start with like such limited capital, and it almost forces the owner to be into like hustler's mode, right? Like my dad and I started with a truck and a credit card, like no capital whatsoever. But knowing what I know now, I see restoration franchisees, right? Doctors, lawyers, engineers, whatever, and they'll go out and get these SBA loans for a couple $100,000 to start their businesses, right? And they'll be able to like float a technician or a crew chief for like, the minimum viable staff. And what that does is it kind of puts them in the position where they don't have to hustle as much. So I think that's actually like a awesome, genuinely awesome idea, right? So I'd start by doing that. And then the second thing that I would do is I would focus on taking away all my self-limiting beliefs, like becoming super aware of how I am as a leader and knocking down all those self-limiting beliefs. So anytime where it's like, oh, I can't sell. Well, why do I think that I can't sell? Or, oh, the scarcity mindset, like I can't afford this thing, even though it logically makes sense. Why can I not afford this? And I would join masterminds. I would join, go to the restoration conferences, join the masterminds, get the different consultants, actively try to find the experts and just build myself, because I realized that we, especially with the hustlers to that scale topic, are the biggest bottleneck to our business. So I would actively focus on breaking that down. And three, I would always be cognizant of what levers am I pulling on, because you always have opportunity costs. So it's like, should I really be going in the field and sucking out sewer water, or can I find somebody for $30 an hour or $20 an hour to do that while I go build relationships with plumbers, property managers, and such? So yeah, those are the top three things I would probably do differently.
Yeah, if I had to go suck sewer water, I would probably charge more than that myself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, you know, people watching this program could be in huge markets. Where are you located? Chicago?
Chicagoland. Yep.
Chicago. Beautiful scenery in the background. Others
Mhm.
might be in a town of 10,000, 20, 30.
Yep.
How does that work with the hustle? Is it different from one geographic area to another, or does it work everywhere?
I think it works everywhere. I mean, I have clients pretty much all over the states. I have this restoration mastermind slash coaching program too. And, you know, like restoration is a very percentage of households kind of business. So 1 in 10 houses are going to have fire or water damage. And yes, it's true that like in markets like Idaho, for example, there's probably less losses than Chicago, but there's also less restoration companies. But like I've seen 8-figure restoration companies in almost every little town that I've gone. Heck, we just got back from Memphis, and I have a client down in Memphis that does 8 figures of restoration work in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's like such a small, city compared to Chicago. So yeah, I think all these things that come up, they're almost like self-limiting beliefs. Oh, I can't have what Alex built because I'm not in Chicago. Well, you also have to realize that in Chicago, there's probably 15 other companies that are competing against the market share that we're competing against. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
it's like the larger the market, the more competition, and that just kind of weighs itself out. But no, I think every restorer throughout the nation has an equal opportunity. And I've seen some amazing companies be built even in like rural areas, like completely rural areas with not huge population centers.
Makes sense. So our topic today is Hustlers Fail at Scale. Alex Duta, any final words to share?
I think the concept of hustlers fail at scale is a mindset shift that an example of a mindset shift at least, right? And I think that there's the number one thing we talk about in the restoration industry and how to grow and scale a business is very technical. We talk about drying, we talk about, IICRC certifications, how many air movers to use, what's the technical ways, and all those things are very valuable and they're a part of our restorer identity. But I think one thing we don't talk about enough is the most valuable real estate within restoration, and that's the 6 inches in between our ears. At the end of the day, the number one thing I think holding restorers back, and the reason the average restorer only does $2 to $3 million a year, is because of the mindset, is because we don't get vulnerable enough and we don't talk about our lessons and we don't have these realizations. And then we tend to like geek out over the technical stuff. Not saying that that's not important. I think it's very important and we should be amazing restorers. And I'm IICRC certified. I stand for all that stuff. But the proportion is kind of what I have an issue with, right? There are no, heavy how to build a business or self-limiting belief courses for the restoration industry. And at the end of the day, we go through a lot of that. We go through a lot of trauma as restorers. By nature, we're blue-collar entrepreneurs. We have a lot of things from our past that are holding us back. So I challenge every restorer to just step one is awareness, start becoming more aware of it. Step two, start looking in other industries. Like I've read a lot of books, I've listened to a lot of podcasts that help with that. And until, it becomes more prevalent within our industry, I think looking outside and trying to scoop that up is huge. And yeah, we've only got one of us.